Forms of short films are hard to define. In my opinion, a short film is its own form, as they contain a message rather than a story. This message will often be presented in the form of a story with characters, but the characters are only used to represent a wider moral or topical issue. I tried to make my own film fit this convention, as the characters and narrative are only really part of the film to represent the theories I'm trying to get across to my audience. Other conventions of short films include a small cast, limited settings, limited post-production technology, no star marketing, and have a duration of between 3 and 20 minutes, although some can last up to 40 minutes. The reasoning behind many of these conventions is because of the low budget a short film will typically have, and the need for it to be filmed somewhere easily accessible. The narrative of a short film will also be relatively simple and easy for the audience to follow to help the audience understand the more complex nature of the topical issue, for example. A feature film would not conventionally do this, because it may be seen as entertaining, and a high budget production company would not want to take the risk of wasting the budget on something viewers may not find enjoyable. Feature filmmakers have more pressure on them from production companies to make money. They're not interested in making something creative. Whereas short films do not have this pressure, as they're independent and their short duration means that it won't make a big difference to the audience by taking up 5 minutes to watch it. Short films do not have to worry about making a profit. My short film is a social drama. This suited the idea I had well, as my aim was to inform the audience about current issues discussed in my film. As this is a convention of the social genre, I made it imperative to make this a feature to add into my short film. The drama genre is seen more dominantly in the main narrative, when the two characters attend their job interview and go on a date, to add to the real-life element to the film. The aim of this was to add an aspect of relatability so the audience may be able to put themselves in the position of characters within the film, and perhaps help them understand the theories discussed more easily. Whilst analysing certain media texts for my blog, I've really enjoyed conducting extra research on them and either watching or re-watching them in my spare time. There were 3 media texts in particular that I looked at, which have inspired me and influenced the decisions made for my short film. These include Memento, The Beguiled 2017 version, and A Favour. After watching Memento in my media lesson, I became intrigued by its unique narrative structure and was interested in researching more about the origins of the film and what the story was behind its anachronic narrative. I ended up creating a Memento mood board, which was compiled of all the information I had researched surrounding features such as the film's complex editing techniques, the short story Nolan's brother wrote, which the film was based on, and how it seemed to have the conventions of short film in a feature film. I found this particularly interesting and made me want to create something that would confuse, frustrate, and fascinate my audience as much as this film had made me. Analysing The Beguiled's film poster made me more interested in Coppola's style of directing and how it seemed to compare to the 2017 film's predecessor. I watched the original and became wrapped up in the comparisons made by various online articles. The feminist style of the remake was something I wanted to recreate. The Favour, one of the short films I analysed right at the start of the year, encouraged me to base my film around a topical issue, as this one is around terrorism. The ending shocked me and, like Memento, made me want to create something that would make my audience feel in a similar way. In terms of narrative theories, gaze doesn't really conform to any conventions. For instance, Prop's character theory explains the 7 different character types that we typically see in films. As there are only 3 characters in my film, this made it impossible to include all of the character types for a start. I would say that Girl from my film fits into the role of the princess, or victim, but Boy doesn't really fit into a role. Typically, he would probably be considered as the hero. However, in this case, he is somewhat seen as the villain, perhaps like a false hero. Similarly, the interview does not really have a role to fit into as such, but acts more as a narrative device than her own character. My narrative strays far from Todorov's narrative theory, as it starts and ends with characters outside of their own selves, acting more as tools to present the male and female gaze than people created to make the audience relate to. Because gaze is a frame story, the central narrative does roughly fit Todorov's narrative theory, with an equilibrium, disruption, and a new equilibrium. The only thing is, the disruption isn't really much of an event as such, but more a disruption to the audience. Viewers will see what Boy is really interested in when Girl thinks that everything is perfect. There is no real disruption in her world. Originally, I had planned to create a short film that has an anachronic narrative, where there is no distinct dominance between any of the different narrative threads. However, through making this film, I had decided that this would not be the most suitable way of presenting my film, so I used a split-screen narrative instead. This is slightly different because it presents the narratives along spatial rather than temporal lines, which is what I'd aimed for. I haven't used split screen all that much throughout my film, but rather different colour filters distinguish between each character's point of view. I'm confident that my film poster and review conform to the typical conventions of real ones, as I was careful to include specific features during the production of them to make sure this was the outcome. The conventions of film posters include showing the director's name, release date or time of year, reviews, star marketing, a billing block, main characters featured on the main image, title of film, and tagline, as well as clearly establishing the film genre. Although these are the typical conventions of film posters, this does not mean that all posters will include all of these features. In some cases, very few of them will be shown. For example, the poster for The Handmaiden only features the director's name, other films by the director, and the title of the film, against the artful background. Even the main image gives very little information about the film's narrative or any main characters. I found this poster very interesting to look at and analyse, as it holds very few conventions of a film poster, and helped me to think about what I could design for my own film poster. In the end, although I loved looking at this poster, I chose not to copy its artistic style. Instead, I stuck to a more traditional film poster that included most of the conventional features. For example, my poster included all the usual conventions, including a billing block, tagline, and a review. One thing that my own did not include was the release date. I do regret not trying more to fit it in, however, as I think this was a crucial convention to include. Throughout the development of my review, I tried my best to replicate a real film review, in particular, the way they are written and laid out. As this was my first time writing in the style, I found it quite difficult to get in the mindset of a film critic, and especially when applying the informality that one must to my own review. This is the main reason why I had to rewrite my film review, because I had written the first one too formally. Getting teacher feedback on this helped me realise what I needed to improve on. After working on this, I'm pleased with the way my film review sounds when reading it. It is now written more concisely and formally. Other review conventions, mostly to do with the design, I made sure to pay close attention to when adding them in. These features include having a bold film title, a comedic image caption, a release date and sometimes the duration, a brief overview of the film director, cast and plot, the verdict, and the star rating.